Welcome to another episode of Coder Conversations. We have special guest William Herman. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. How you all doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into programming? What were you doing before that?
Well, like I was telling you earlier, I kind of started off with like ANSI escape characters as programming, according to my teacher back in the day, which was just pretty much animating stuff. I think what I did is I took like a few characters and had a rocket like start at the bottom and just kind of like shoot up the screen. And that was kind of like my very first intro. I think it was like 81, I guess, when I was in the 8th grade. And at that time, I was living in a town called Sonoma, Sonoma, California. But my father worked over in Marin County, a town called Novato. And I had just come from Napa, which is like right next to Sonoma, out of junior high school. And I'm not quite sure. My dad put me in the school over there. He thought maybe because it was like a fancy rich school. I mean, everybody in Nevada was like rich, so they had computers and stuff back then. In 81, computers were kind of like pretty expensive. And so they had, I believe in the school, they had Commodore 64s and Commodore PETs. I know for sure. The class that I had, I know that they had the PETs for sure. And the library down the road, they had the Commodore 64. And boy, I think I just dated myself. But before even hard drives. This was all floppy disk back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the 5.25-inch floppies and was it 3. I can't remember the exact. I know it's like 3-inch and 5-inch.
Yeah, I don't remember if these had 2 or just one 5 and a quarter inch floppy. But then after that, I went after I left that school. The high school that I went to after that, they didn't have computers. This was in Sonoma. So fast forward, after high school, I joined the military and I was stationed over in Germany for 3 years. And I didn't do anything with computers probably until 93. And of all things, I was a truck driver driving cross country. And I was tired of spending all my money in the arcades, like on the arcade games, right? Mm-hmm. So I just started like reading. I don't know if have you ever heard of the magazine Computer Shopper?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a really big, thick book, right? And I just started looking at like reading all the stuff about all the hardware and stuff. And then once I saved up a little bit of money as a truck driver, I went out and bought myself a 386 with 1 megabyte of RAM and a 40 megabyte hard drive. And the rest is history after that. But back then it was DOS 5. And like I said, Kyle Simpson and I have the same start, I think, or at least from what he was saying, because I started off, my first real programming language was QBasic. And I messed around with that for a while until I stopped into a Barnes and Nobles and I was like, hey, what's this fancy programming language called assembly language, right? Messed around with that for a couple of months and I started learning about just like really low level graphics card programming. And I didn't really learn much before I ran into this book called Tricks of the Game Programming Gurus by Andre Lamoth. And then from there, the rest is history for C. I just started, and that guy, the first chapter I learned, everything just clicked, right? Because I mean, from my past experience with Quick Basic and like, the geometry of like the screen, you have your X, Y, or your X, Y coordinates and everything. And so, and then I started reading about stuff like bit shifting and stuff like that what was that mode? There was a graphics mode called
13H.
It was either 13 or 10H, where you could do the bit shifting, and he showed you the math and everything for bit manipulation to where you can just blast the whole screen like several. I mean, we're talking like 30, 40 times a second.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I guess about the time I was reading about all this, I went ahead and got Windows 3.1, and that lasted about 6 months, and then Windows 95. So Windows 95, they had this very short-lived API called WinG.
Hmm.
WinG. So I started reading about that, and then I guess around that time is when the first DirectX came out, and I started doing all that, and I don't know. I messed around with game programming for about 7 years. I actually picked up Visual Basic 6 and did a kind of like a HUD using the assets from what was that, Civ 2, I think, because they were just like plain what were they, PNG files or something, I can't remember. So you could just use the assets like for cursors and whatnot. So I made like a HUD but no game, and I guess around that time I just decided that yeah, game programming wasn't for me, because I had actually run into people through an internet relay chat channel, and they started talking about it, and like literally game programming, especially nowadays, game programming is like rocket science. And
Oh yeah.
that's I think that's around the time where I was like, no, I wanna learn how to program, but I just want to play games. I don't want to learn how to make them, right?
Yeah, I heard the industry was pretty bad. It's nonstop grind, crunch all the time. I wouldn't want to work in the game industry.
Well, back then, have you ever heard of microprose?
Yeah, yeah.
All the games that I liked back then were made by microprose, and from what I understand, or at least for like XCOM, the original XCOM back in the
Mm,
'90s, and what was it, Masters of Orion 2,
yeah.
that was a mom and pop. That was a husband wife team, and then they had some friend that did the audio for them.
Oh wow.
And those were, I mean, to me, those games are still the best. I mean, if they could somehow take the game and update the graph, not like this new stuff. The new games are fine, but the old school games, they were just like a step above, you know.
Yeah,
So
it seemed like they were more complicated, like more geared towards adults. Everything is like streamlined and simplified now. Like
right.
XCOM, Masters of Orion, like those, like the manuals usually was like 80, 90 pages.
Yeah, that was kind of like almost half the adventure back then, was the reading the manual, right? I mean, actually, what I would do is I'd just jump into the game and try to figure out how to play the game, and then I'd go back and read a little part of the manual, like when I needed to figure something out. So
Terrence, did you play any computer games back then, like XCOM or?
Um, I computer games. My first computer game was maybe Half Life or Counter Strike. I'm not like. I think my first game actually was like Super Mario or something on the PlayStation. So it was a console game, wasn't really PC based. But I can sympathize with the whole, like, the first part of the journey is like reading the manual. So you get a new game as a kid, you pop open the cart, you pop open the box, and you get the manual, and you're on the way home, and you're like, it'll be 8, 9 o'clock at night. You're using the street lights to like read the manual on the way home and stuff, and um, you don't have that wonder anymore. Like, not to sidetrack the topic, but it's gaming has changed now, especially with like Steam
Mm,
and everything, where you just, oh, I want this game, buy it. There's no getting in the car, going to the store, going to Toys R Us, going to the cashier and asking if they have a copy of whatever game, taking out your $50 you made raking leaves to, that you saved up for, all half a year.
That was the real GoFundMe, right?
Yeah,
The
the
paper.
GoFundMe was this right here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. No, I don't remember what my first game was. It was probably in the arcade somewhere. It wasn't Pac-Man. It was something like Missile Command or maybe Battlezone. Battlezone was like the old green and black screen. Driving it, you had like Battlezone, and then you had like Super Battlezone or Super Tank. Battlezone and Super Tank, something like that, whatever. But man, that was like old school. It was like monochrome, green and black. That was it.
You remember the shareware disc they used to have back in the day? It's kind of like how you would be able to play like a bunch of different games. They kind of gave you a little demos of every game.
Oh yeah. I what was that? PC Gamer used to do that back in the day, and then there was a magazine called Wired. I think they would do that. That's actually how I got introduced to. I think it was probably BSD. Like what they called it back then, they called it BSD X86 or something like that. That came out, the shareware. But then I think my first Linux that I ever messed with back in the day was probably Slackware. But then ever since I ran into Debian, I'm diehard Debian now, all the way. I mean, I'll mess around with Debian for like a desktop or Ubuntu for a desktop, but my heart is still with Debian.
Are you're a Linux user?
Oh yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I messed around with Ubuntu for a while, and then I messed around with Slack. I mean, that's Slackware. Is that what it's called? Right?
Yeah, it's a Linux distribution.
Yeah. I messed around with like various Linux distributions for a while, just because it was like, they were good on memory, and I didn't have a supercharged PC back then. And I was like, oh, I'll just run it off of a USB stick. It's amazing, and you realize you have to install everything yourself manually and sudo git and all the other stuff. And, yeah, it's a lot of fun though. PC back then, I was like, oh, Kevin, I don't know if you've used Linux before, but I don't know how far it's come, but it's really powerful. Like as far as at least 10 years ago when I probably used it, probably even 20 now.
It was a toy.
It was way back then, and like they have Wine and stuff. You can emulate Windows inside of Linux and Steam and everything, and it was like, wow, you have the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, back then, half of it. First of all, the user interface, Ubuntu is like really. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like on the same level as Windows as far as like a good user interface goes, but it's pretty close. I remember Ubuntu 8. Oh my God, what a nightmare! Because like I was trying to use it. I remember I was trying to use it. This was back when you guys know what iSCSI is, or ISESI.
No.
So it's kind of like an Ethernet protocol for hard drives, and kind of like it's you know what a SAN is, right? Like you have it's a storage attached network, a SAN. So it's kind of like that, but it's kind of like a direct. It can be a direct connection, but a lot of times what people will do is they'll plug like this hard drive into like, let's say like a 4U rack that has like 16 hard drives in it, and then they'll run like an initiator, and you can communicate over TCP/IP, or is it? No, actually, I think it's layer 2. But so, anyways, over your like network cable, so you can access this hard drive that's in the server in the other room, like it's an actual drive on your system, right? And I'm sorry if I'm butchering the explanation here. I'm not like an expert with iSCSI and all that, but so I was trying to do this with Ubuntu back in the day, and it was just like a train wreck. it wasn't working. And like Terrence was saying, back in the day, 10 years ago, or even like I think when I first started messing around with it, it was a little more than a toy, at least to me. You had to have like specific hardware for it to run well, and then even then it was glitchy.
Yeah, that was the hard part. It was like you had to have everything like exactly how they recommended it, or you're just gonna have a hard time. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's just like plug and play. Ubuntu is actually a really good developer platform. I mean, it's really good. I mean, I don't know if I'm still kind of, because of the old school days, I'm still a little bit leery as using it as a server. But in my eyes, being old school, anything that runs a GUI on it or a graphical user interface doesn't need to be running as if you're going to be using it as a server, it shouldn't have a graphical user interface on it, because that's like another security risk right there, right? Because you have all this extra stuff running. And I don't know. I don't really know the architecture between like X Windows, which is like the graphical. It's like the underlying shell, so to speak, for like Unity and all that stuff for like the graphical user interface on.
Mm-hmm.
But like you can connect over a network to to X Windows or X11 if you prefer. And to me, that just screams, yeah, come hack me. So, but yeah, I'm not, I played at being a security expert back in the day. And yeah, nowadays it's getting really complicated. I even started taking a course on it, but the people that I'd taken the course through, they, yeah, it wasn't very good. So
there's so many layers of abstraction now that you can't really ever tell what's going on, because there's just so much stuff going on.
you're right. But so after my my stint with game programming, a buddy of mine he was living in Nevada at the time, asked me to come out and take care of his dogs like 1 week out of the month. And he was a radio station engineer. The guy I was telling you about earlier, he worked for Lockheed Martin back in the 80s as an electronics engineer. So he was doing radio station work over in California, but he was living in Nevada, and he needed somebody to look after his dogs. And he had a computer shop that was kind of waning. He had been doing, like in the past, he had done really good business. So I kind of took over that, did my own computer thing, fixing people's computers and whatnot, and found out that I can make pretty good money removing viruses from people's computers. And that's when I started programming VB.net to clean the registry. And this was like Windows XP days. And so to clean the registry and to help me kill the viruses that, like, when you would kill the process, you can't delete the file until you kill the process, right? But as soon as you kill the process, some of the files would rename themselves and then start a new process up under a different name. So yeah, I had to write software to because there's no way you could do that fast enough, right? And then you had, what was that feature where you used to be able to, it was like file attributes to where you could like lock the file. So it would lock the file, make a copy of itself, then delete the old, unlock the file, delete itself, and then start up the other process, some of these viruses. And I had to write software to figure all this out. And I did that for a while. And me and my buddy, we had always been, so the Beagle Bone, this is the green, this came after the Beagle Bone Black. We had been talking about the Beagle Bone platform for a long time, because we both had projects that we had in mind to do with that. And I guess that was like around maybe 2012 when whenever the BeagleBone Black came out. We were just like all in then, and by that time we were living in Arizona, and we were living completely off grid. So he had an AC inverter that had looked like an RG45 connector on it, like a network plug on it, right? But what it was like a CAN bus interface. So we got this. So like the Raspberry Pi, this has like headers on it to where you can connect like expansion boards on it. So we bought this CAN bus adapter to put on here, plugged it into the thing, and found out that it was like spitting out a lot of information. And so we spent like the better part of a year trying to reverse engineer that protocol. We got about 75% of the way done. Well, I mean, I did the software, and I mean, he did the hardware like a long time ago, right? So, yeah. So he was he'd find a little bit of information, give it to me, and then I put that together with what I knew, and we slowly reverse engineered the protocol. And so this was for an AC inverter, so it was spitting out voltages, amperages, and a bunch of other statistics, right? So I ran into this. I'm smiling because this is actually kind of a funny story. I ran into this library called, or not a library, but like, well, I guess you could call it like a framework or whatever. Pretty much 20,000 lines of code to do like WebSockets in C. It was kind of like a framework or an API, whatever the guys call it. It was called Mongoose. And it was like really fast, but it didn't play well with other processes. So like I had to write two halves of an application, one for like decrypting, not decrypting, but like not sure of the word that I'm looking for here, but I would take all the information out there, put it into the right format, then serve it out over this web page. But because the Mongoose was not, it was a single process thing. You couldn't run another process together. I had to write two separate applications that communicated with one another through POSIX IPC, right? Which is pretty much, what the heck is that called? I'm trying to think of it. It's like basically a shared file in memory. And I had to write like a binary mechanism, locking mechanism, because all the like the API calls and everything in Linux, like they would call back and forth into and out of the kernel like 12 times, and it wasn't fast enough, nowhere near fast enough. So each call in and out of the kernel, it can take like anywhere from I think it's like 50 nanoseconds, but typically it's like 300 milliseconds, right? So we're talking like 3 times a second is what the information you can get from that. But I needed more than that. I needed more like maybe a couple of hundred or whatever. But the funny part to that story is I actually made the program so fast with my locking mechanism that I was reading the information out of the inverter so fast, spitting it out over a WebSocket into Firefox, that Firefox would crash because it just literally flooded Firefox into non-existent. I mean, it was just like freeze and then crash. So anyways, I mean, to me, that's funny, but that was the start of my high performance Linux programming days back then.
Yeah, it seems like a program is a lot more high level now. How did you make that transition into a more high level?
Well, I kind of really haven't. I mean, I know. So keep in mind during this, I'm kind of jumping around here, but so when Docker came out, brand new Docker came out, I was right on there. It was another train wreck, right? When it first came out, it was another train wreck. I think originally Solaris was the operating system of the time that actually came out with containers first. And then it kind of like migrated over into Linux. And, so around that time, I mean, when Node.js first came out, I was like right there, right? It also wasn't ready. I mean, it was probably in better condition than when Docker first came out, but I guess maybe I just didn't maybe know how to use it or whatever, right? To my advantage. But eventually, after a couple of years, I actually wrote like a so again for this right here, it's got like a little chip on here for power management, and you can access that with tools in Linux, and you can write C applications to access that. So what I was doing is I was taking, I was like writing helper, not functions, but helper programs, just very small, concise programs. And then I was accessing it through exec in Node.js. So I wrote like a web interface to where you can go in there and like, you couldn't modify the bits or anything like that, but it would read like the registers and everything in the power management IC, which that's still on my GitHub, but I haven't updated that in like 5 or 6 years. So, but anyways, after that project, then the job working for a company using this hardware, I'm still kind of under an NDA, or I haven't gotten an okay to talk about their hardware and stuff, but kind of landed in my lap because my buddy got a job doing the hardware for him. And then my buddy was like, hey, you need a software developer? My friend here, you know, he's been working with this platform for like about 5-6 years now. So, and that was actually my last and only gig as a software programmer. I mean, but you know, I had been doing it as a hobby for years and years and years already.
So, like, do you find it hard to find other jobs in software since you know you've been primarily working on the lower levels?
I mean, you probably know this as well as I do. I mean, once you learn a programming language and you learn it good, it's pretty much the same thing. All you have to do is learn. It's like, say, like not necessarily like learning German or Japanese or something like that, but it's like it's kind of like a spoken language. You just need to learn the syntax and everything, and then once that, I mean, you already have the general concepts in your head, like, you know, I mean, your various algorithms, your data structures, and whatnot, right? So the only difference with like low-level programming really is like, I mean, actually JavaScript has bit manipulation in it too. I mean, you can do bit shifting and bit masking and whatnot in or bit manipulation in JavaScript as well. So, right. But I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure, yeah, you can do the same thing in C#. I want to say that you could probably do the same thing in Go, but I'm really not on that level with Go yet. You know, I'm just kind of like tinkering around with Go right now. But like definitely C# or C++, and then of course assembly as well. But I mean, outside of that, I'm not sure what else you could do. What other languages you can do bit manipulation with.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people that listen to the show, they're probably more higher level programmers. So like, what is bit shifting, and like what can you do with it?
Well, bit shifting. Well, this is where my terminology is going to fail me, right? Since I'm self-taught and whatnot. But basically, every number, when it comes down to machine language, is ones and zeros, right? And I mean, do you guys know where the ones and zeros come from? So like in a CPU, you have a CPU is built out of transistors, right?
Yeah.
You have on and off.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from. What do they call? Well, it's binary either way. So basically, if you have a number that says like 1110 and you shift to the left, you're going to shift that number to the left and you're going to add a zero to the right. And depending on how long, it really depends on the system you're working with, but depending on how long well, like let's say you're like right at 32 bits, you shift, you're going to lose you're going to lose that bit on the end there, but you're going to gain a zero on the other side, and then vice versa when you shift back to the right. So basically, you're moving it's kind of like taking like a frame and sticking it here and just moving these numbers back and forth, except for once you shift the number off, it's gone. When you shift it back, that's going to be a zero there. It doesn't matter if it was a 1 or a 0 before, it's going to be a 0 now. So, I mean, I'm doing like a really bad explanation of, I think, no, I don't think that was, I don't think Kyle actually talked about it. Kyle Simpson, did he talk about bit shifting or bit manipulation? I know he's like a JavaScript developer, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually been like 6 years since I've done any proper coding, so I'm also a bit rusty. So then you have bit masking and whatnot. That's where you set up like a mask, and you say, yeah, I want to check these bits and see what they are, and then you get the numbers back from the mask, right? So again, my terminology is failing me here because it's a little bit more complicated than that. But then you have and or like, so like comparing two numbers, and you take one number and then you and it with another number. Any number that's like both ones on both of them is going to come back a 1 or a 0, depending on whatever. And or is going to be either a 0 or 1 in either number, and it's going to come back a 1. And then, but see, that number that's coming back to you is binary. Then you have to convert it to like either hexadecimal or decimal. So, or,
So yeah, I know you've been programming for like a very long time. Programming back in the day was a lot different. They didn't have all the courses, all the books. Well, they had the books, but they didn't have the videos.
Yeah, you had to go to Barnes and Nobles. There was no Google. You were lucky to have any kind of internet access back in the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question actually about that. How do you go about troubleshooting things? Do you pair program a lot? Did you pair program a lot, or is it all just up to you to figure out?
Well, some of it, there's going to be some problems for individual programmers. Like, so, I mean, you got to kind of think about it. How do you troubleshoot a program, right?
Right.
It's going to be based on what you know. And if you don't know what's going on, then you're going to hit up Google, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you're just kind of stabbing at it. Hey, is this what the problem is? Or until you finally figure it out, and then that's something you add. But I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah, you just kind of poke at it. I guess things haven't really changed.
I mean, that's everybody in IT. Anybody who says that they don't use Google, they're full of it.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody can know everything. It's like,
right.
I mean, I feel like that I'm even failing explaining what I did for like years, and but it's been 6 years since I've done it. But yeah, I probably need to brush up on this stuff. But no, as far as like trying to get a job, I'm not really trying to get a job like right now. I mean, for me, programming is more of like a hobby. Now, if somebody came to me with a job offer for something that I felt that I was ready for, then sure. And I've come pretty close a couple of times, but then, you know, they always come up with something that I'm like, that I don't have any experience in. And that's kind of where imposter syndrome, because I can figure it out. I mean, we can all figure it out, right? It's just like it's going to take a little bit of time. It was like if somebody wanted me to I've never written a line of code in, let's say Pascal or ADA, but I could figure it out. It's going to take me a month or two maybe to get the syntax down and, you know, figure out all the different quirks and everything for whatever they may want done. But I mean, it all goes back to, you know, knowing your data structures or what's best used for certain situations, algorithms and stuff. And look, again, nobody knows everything. So
like, what are some of the things you do aside from code?
Well, I was in the military. I've driven an 18-wheeler for a couple of years. I was an auto mechanic for 8 years. I did construction. I mean, I recently worked for a packing house, and when we were working 6 days a week, but then when they rotated our schedule back to 5 days a week, I picked up woodworking as a hobby because I needed something to keep me busy, right? I mean,
what do you think you'll do when you retire from the dev life? Let's say you retire from the dev life. What's your next big adventure? Because it seems like you've done a lot already.
well, I don't know about my next adventure, but I've been messing around with Go a lot. I'm actually, so I was talking with Kevin about this earlier. So when I first started into programming and stuff, web development was looked down on. And the reason why web development was looked down on, because there really wasn't a whole lot to web development with Web 1.0. You had a static web page. It was pretty much just HTML. And I mean, anybody can learn that in like, 2 or 3 hours, right? So then you had Web 2.0 that came out. And I don't know how long it took, but eventually Web 2.0 started getting like really interesting because, you know, you had stuff like WebSockets that where you could communicate between your browser and a server in real time, which is what I did with my first big project with a BeagleBone. And I mean, nowadays you have, what is it called? gRPC. But then like, so I guess my answer to your question is that I want to learn more about web development. I already know a good bit about web development, but I could stand to learn more, I think. I mean, some people are using like Python and like Flask or Django. I'm not really, I mean, I would learn it if I really had to, Python, but I'm not really a big Python fan. I mean, it's okay, but it's like, it's a script language. It's interpreted. So this goes back to, you know, me working like low level and stuff, everything. If it's not performant, then I'm not really that interested in it. You know, Go, I mean, Go is slower than C, properly written C, but I mean, sometimes fast enough is just fast enough, right?
That's an interesting take. So you say that you choose the languages on the performance that you can get out of it, basically.
Right. Because I mean, I still have an interest I haven't really done any like SCADA programming, but are you guys familiar with SCADA?
No.
So it's like, I really don't know a whole lot about it myself, but basically SCADA is like, let's say the interface. It's the technology that like for like industrial like PLCs, if you know what programmable logic controllers. So like, say you have like your laptop like right in front of you, and you work for like a a power company and you want to see some instrumentation, what's going on, like at the power plant, right? SCADA is what would be, I guess, is kind of what would be communicating the technology and the software and everything put together will be what would communicate with, I forget what is SCADA, because I'm like butchering the explanation of it right now.
Yeah, I've never used it
I've
before.
never used it. No.
Well, a lot of like, I actually learned about it when I was doing, when I went to that cybersecurity course.
Yeah, what do you think about cybersecurity? Like, what really interests you about cybersecurity?
I'm just interested in anything computer,
Hmm.
really. So supervisory control and data acquisition, that's what SCADA stands for. So they have like a lot of PLC and RTU programming apparently going on. And PLC stands for Programmable Logic Controller. And RTU, I guess, would be like real-time unit, I guess. But like, yeah, it's like a whole big, it's like a whole big topic. And I would like to learn more about that. But I mean,
Do you feel like? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you feel like a lot of coders nowadays are missing out by not going into the lower level?
I feel like it. Yeah. I mean, what do you think? Because you know about like going to Barnes and Nobles and like reading the books and learning like the real deal, right? Versus what's going on nowadays with like web programming and whatnot.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the lower you get, the more you understand it, the more you're able to really solve problems, because everything is abstraction built on top of those lower level concepts. So
exactly.
And
sometimes that abstraction gets in your way, right?
Exactly. But yeah, I think it's hard to find like a good resource and all of that now, because there's just so much, so many resources out there that it's hard to just pick one and stick with it.
Well, that book that I mentioned earlier by Andre Lamotte, you can get it off of Amazon now. You're going to pay $138 for it.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was selling for like $39 back in the day, but
what's the book called?
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I don't really remember much after the first chapter in that book, because I mean, the first chapter just like opened my eyes, right? It just like it blew my mind.
Was it called like Game Programming Gems or
Tricks of the Game Programming Gurus?
Okay.
Andre Lamotte. I remember like inside where the forward is, it had a picture of him standing next to supposedly his Ferrari, back in the day when game programmers actually made a paycheck. Now they're paying him like what, $5 an hour or something.
Wow.
Yeah, they get abused. Who are some programmers you looked up to back in the day?
Mostly people that I knew from like over the internet. So I'm not going to say his last name, but I knew this guy named Jason. Last I heard, he was actually working as a contractor for a company for the FBI as a programmer. There was another guy who was in a undisclosed bunker under a mountain somewhere in the United States, right? This guy was like a hardware, electronics engineer and programming genius. I don't remember what his, we used to call him Opossum or Possum. Guy was super smart. Another guy that hung around in the same channels, Rick. He was actually a contractor for United States government doing like tracked vehicle simulation, to where they could do like, instead of putting him in like the real deal, getting some training, they put him in the simulator. He did some coding over in Iraq, and he's like a few years older than me, so he had been obviously been coding before that for a while. But this guy was also really smart. I would say he was all right with hardware, but not anything like the other guy. The other guy was like a genius. This guy was super smart. My buddy Steve, at the time, I mean, he could, if like really pushed, do some programming, but he was more of a hardware engineer. But the reason why he could do that programming is because he understood the hardware really well. His hobby was actually taking 1980s retro arcade boards and repairing them. He'd buy them off of eBay for like 10, 12 bucks or whatever, turn around, fix them, and then like he could have sold them for like a couple $100 each. But no, well, like the last time I saw him, he probably had like 300 or 400 arcade boards in his place. And then there was, his name was Sean. We called him Washu, which is, I guess, like a character from, Dragon Ball Z or something? He was the guy who worked for Sun Micro. I mean, he was like really good. And then like his protege, a guy we called A-Dot. Not quite sure where he was from or where, but he was also really good programmer. But I learned a lot from all these guys. I would say I probably learned more from like Possum than anybody, because like whenever I got like the project where we were reverse engineering this protocol, I'd figure something out and I get stuck, and I just like put that like on the forum, and he just come straight back, well, do this or try this, and I try it and it would work, right? So
this was back in the Merc days, right? MIRC.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, but I was actually talking with these guys on a forum. This forum was started from a different platform. It was the platform was called an MSP 430, and it didn't run an operating system. It had like 128K memory and like maybe 256 or 512K flash storage. And that's where I learned a lot about all this stuff right there, because I mean, obviously you had to keep your code very tight. You know, you couldn't just be like blasting in like let's just say an array of like 512 something, because you just like it wouldn't even run. It would just just crash because you're overwriting the memory in it. And yeah, so but yeah. But Rick and Possum, they both, I think his name was actually Kevin, now that I think about it. The other guys, they were showing me how to we would take like the printf function for the C library in Linux, and they just tell me how they'd show me like, don't need this, go make it to where it doesn't use that stuff. And then whenever I'd run into a problem, right, they just kind of like guide me. But once in a while they would like might even do something for me, but that wasn't the point. The point was I was trying to learn, right? So these guys were kind of like my mentors, trying to help me out. And I don't know, there was days when I first started learning C, and then I had like a C++ compiler. I thought I was writing C++ because I was compiling it with a C++ compiler, right? But it was still C. I don't know if you guys know much of the difference between C++ and C, but C is by nature is a procedural language. C++ is object oriented.
Mm-hmm.
C++ has concept of what a string is. C doesn't. So C only knows what an array of characters is, right? Yeah. I mean, just base nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have like APIs, like Linux APIs and whatnot that actually, I think it's called string.h, where, yeah, okay, now it knows about strings, but on the lower level, it really doesn't. It still only understands characters, whereas C++ no string. And, you have cout versus printf, and there's a whole lot of differences.
Like, what made you go ahead, Terry?
I was going to ask, since you're primarily a low level, sorry if you have a hard time hearing, since you're primarily a low level language developer, do you feel like that's helped you become more memory efficient? Because when I'm writing code, especially on the front end, I don't really think about the memory of the browser or the computer that might be serving up my code. Do you feel like you take that into account?
Yes and no, because like I was saying earlier, sometimes something is efficient or fast enough, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something like we're like. Now, keep in mind, I really do like JavaScript a lot. Don't like Java, but I like JavaScript. But like compared to, let's just compare even to like C#. JavaScript is like very wasteful. But if it's going to run something fast enough, does it really matter? I mean, if you only need like a set amount of performance for like a certain operation, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I mean, trust me, back in the day, I was like super like, oh, if it's not C, it ain't it, right? I don't want to. I had to like. Well, I think that probably came with experience, but I also had to turn the way my thinking worked also, because every programming language is a tool, and not everything is a nail, right? So you don't always need to use a hammer when like a wrench or a screwdriver would work. So, or just, I don't know what the proper analogy would be, but so to answer your question, yes, but also no.
Right. If it's good enough, you're fine with that. That's basically what I'm getting. Is that if it's good enough, it doesn't have to be like emphasized. But if it gets the job done, then it gets the job done.
So what's your prime? I don't even know, Terrence. What is your primary language?
So I'm mostly working in JavaScript on the front end and the back end. Yeah, I'm mostly just working in JavaScript. I've messed around with Go. I've messed around with Java. Didn't really get like the concepts didn't really stick for me, and I can probably attribute that to me just not finding a mentor that could like show me or teach me those languages. And for me, JavaScript, like learning JavaScript was a lot easier because I could see the result, whether it was in a console or whether it was in like on the browser. I could see my code doing something visually. Working in Python or Go, I couldn't. At least I didn't know how to directly see the result of my code like in a browser. So, yeah.
Well, directly you don't. You would like a Python or Go would be like a back end language, right? Yeah. That would like where you might expose an API, but then you're still going to be communicating with that API with JavaScript or whatever. And I actually struggled, believe it or not, I actually struggled with that idea myself, because I'm kind of like, well, how does this really work? But then I started learning about APIs and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, okay. Because see, that's another thing. API in low-level programming is something completely different. It has nothing to do is application programming interface. It's the same meaning, but it doesn't mean the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could argue either way about that, but because it's kind of the same thing, but it's like one is like for. Do you have like a preferred learning platform like Codecademy or Udacity or anything like that?
So wow, Codecademy. I started on them way back when I went through their Python course and stuff when I was first learning in school. and but I prefer like Udemy, like purchasing courses on Udemy when they go on sale.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll pick up a course for like 10, 15, $20 at the most, depending on who it is.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of like, I think I have some Go courses. I forget the guy's name. It's, I think it's also a T, Travis something.
Yeah, I have one from him also.
Um,
The microservices or the Go and React one.
I think it was just Go in general, like
Oh, okay.
understanding the Go language in general, because it was like really popular, and I think it still is, but I don't think I'll switch from JavaScript anytime soon, unless I just get bored of it. Um,
How long have you been coding, Terrence?
on like professionally, 3 or 4 years. Uh, like at like yeah, as a as a career, but on and off since like 2008. But it's all been like front end stuff. WordPress, uh, basic responsive websites using HTML, CSS, JavaScript
Well,
here and there.
where I'm
Yeah,
going with this is that I think that maybe since like JavaScript seems to be like your main language, learn that really well.
yeah,
Learn that like really well. Everything that because for most things, I mean, especially where like web is concerned, you don't necessarily have to change programming. I mean, you probably know this better than I. You can write
I
back
think
end
any
stuff
with
with
JavaScript.
JavaScript,
Yeah,
front end stuff with JavaScript. I mean, React requires Node.js to be running, right?
hmm,
Node.js and Express. Well, you got your API right there. So,
yeah,
Yeah,
but
man. You can do so much with JavaScript now. Robotics, even I think Excel, they let you use JavaScript now.
mm, that's crazy. I didn't know about that.
like you're just gonna have to find like something that resonates with you as far as like coursework. Maybe stay away from the videos for a while and get a good book and just read
Yeah,
and
I'm.
and you got to play around. You know, you can't just like you know you actually have to write code and then try to figure it. Well, you probably know this already, but I'm just saying you just it, that's why I say that like maybe stick with JavaScript and understand like the standard, the ECMA
Yeah,
standard, and everything really well. Why certain things happen. I think Kyle was talking about that in the video that
yeah,
I was watching from him, because I mean, like 6, 7 years ago, I was actually learning all this stuff that he was talking about, but I've long since forgotten about all that stuff. I feel like I need to get back into it, you know. But
Yeah, when did the web really start getting interesting for you? Because I know you was talking about all the way back when it was like even before CSS.
I think probably somewhere around the time Node.js came out, because then I realized, hey, you could actually do something with this stuff, you know. And maybe a little bit before that, because I remember writing like an HTML and JavaScript thing with jQuery. It was kind of like an alarm clock, but an alarm clock that played a song that you wanted to listen. I was going to add like a playlist to it, but then you know how projects work, like personal projects. Sometimes they get finished, sometimes they don't.
yeah.
Exactly. Are you working on anything interesting these days?
Working on a paycheck. I'm actually I'm not working in the tech field right now, but yeah, I mean here and there, I have like lots of interest in like I think I'm kind of like floating back and forth because I'm trying to figure out where my place is in the modern world, right?
Mm,
Hmm.
Current modern world, and I may have landed with Go as like a back end. So the project that I did professionally as a contract, the front end developer, he was using Go
Hmm.
to I guess it was really a convoluted system. I was just thinking to myself, wow, why are we doing all this? They were actually using Apple servers. I was like, really, Apple servers? server running a GUI, but then you want to put, you want it to run on like Apple hardware too. But they had their reasons. So yeah, he was using Go, and then I'm not sure what other technologies they had, because I was actually doing communicating with the hardware, and then I was exposing it to like the front end through. Have you heard of MQTT?
Mm-mm.
It's like a messaging it's a messaging framework, I guess you would say.
It's like a RabbitMQ, something like that, or
Well, I believe so. RabbitMQ isn't, as far as I'm aware, isn't exactly a specific protocol. It's like an encapsulation of several protocols, and I think MQTT is a part of RabbitMQ. Yeah.
okay.
But it's like it's a pub sub like framework / protocol or something. It's really simple.
Is it like Kafka?
Well, Kafka is again like RabbitMQ, I believe. That's like Apache's version of like RabbitMQ, from my understanding. I did a little bit of looking into it, but not a whole lot. So
delving a little bit off of technology, you kind of mentioned that you were living off grid for a while. Like, what was that like?
So in the beginning, it was rough. Having a hard time even keeping the computers running. No AC in the whole place, but we were living like in Arizona at 6,000, like 6,400 feet. So it was pretty moderate all year round. I think maybe it hit like 101, 102, maybe once or twice a year. And, but it was, so we were using like deep cycle batteries, like 12 deep cycle batteries, which were not really for like off grid. But then towards the end, we got some proper off grid batteries. And then we had like 35, 40 kilowatts worth of panels, just sucking all that power in. And it was like living the dream then. I think the power company, they wanted like $50,000, right? $50,000 to run power to the place out there, because we were like 2 miles off the nearest main road, which was a dirt road when we first moved out there. And so he was saying, why would I pay $50,000 when I can just spend $50,000 on solar equipment, right? And we started off, he got some free panels, like probably from the 80s. They were actually labeled Arco, if you remember that company. You remember that? The gas company Arco?
Yeah.
So they had it was like a diamond that was like segregated into 4 little triangles. That was like their
For some reason, that's not ringing a bell for me. Was that more like a West Coast company? Yeah.
It might be a West Coast company.
It might have been.
Okay.
You originally from where you stand right now?
Yeah, I've been here I was born in South Korea, then moved to Louisiana, then moved to Texas around 8 when I was 8, and I've been here like ever since. So yeah, I'm pretty much a Texan.
Yeah, I lived in Mesquite for about a year and a half when I was driving a truck. I drove for Stevens Transport back in the 90s.
Well, what'd you think about it?
It was all right, because back then, so what game was it? The game that I was playing, like you could go like right there in Mesquite, and they had like all those boutique shops with like all the games in there. And I think CompUSA was down there back in the day.
Oh yeah.
So you could just like, man, what was it? Doom?
Okay, Doom. Yeah.
It was, I think the original Doom was actually made like there in that area there. But I remember going in there and getting the original LucasArts. It wasn't X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, but you had like X-Wing, and then you had TIE Fighter, the separate games. So I remember getting those there as well. And then XCOM and all that stuff back in the day. But I don't know. Mesquite is like a suburb of Dallas, and it was pretty crazy the last time I was there.
Oh yeah, man. There's all kinds of stuff happening out here now.
Yeah, I got one heck of a story. I just don't know if you want to air that story about two people riding in a station wagon out there. One in the back who was armed, and the one driving up front, and they were just tearing up everybody out there with an AK.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
This was like '94, I guess.
yeah, it can get pretty
Wow.
wild.
What's that?
It can get pretty wild out here.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't too bad. I was born and raised in California though, so that's kind of what I'm used to.
You
I
from
lived I lived in
LA?
no up North Bay area by San Francisco,
Mhm.
Mhm.
close to Silicon Valley. But I lived in Louisiana for a little while too. I lived in Hammond for about 9 months. So,
What'd you think about that?
well, I mean, Hammond, you have like two major colleges right there. I think LSU was right there, and then there was like another college. So
Mm.
it was pretty golden, I think. You know, that was back in the day when I was in my 20s.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was party town.
Oh yeah.
So, um, yeah, I don't know. So I'm curious about you a little bit, Kevin. What is your primary programming language? What language do you prefer?
Right now, it's pretty much TypeScript. Back in the day, like in the '90s, when I was first experimenting, I was using C. But the resources really wasn't that good back then. Everything was super low level. You had to compile a code. It took
Yeah,
forever.
right.
Like you had to be super smart to get a job as a programmer back then. So it was kind of intimidating for me. So I didn't really like get back into it seriously, like as a profession until like JavaScript came out. That's when I was working at a hotel at the Marriott, working overnight, and you with JavaScript, you don't really have to install anything on the computer. So that's kind of like how I was able to experiment and teach myself programming over there. And we had to do some stuff in Excel. So I use like VBA to automate the spreadsheets over there. And when something that would take you about 4 hours by hand, you create a script and it does in like 10 minutes. It's like, okay, wow, this is powerful. So that really is like what pushed me to look deeper into programming again. And
Yeah,
I've been in the industry about 6.5 years.
that's about how long I've been out of the industry.
Did you get burnt out, or is you just want to do
I
something
I
different?
did, but see, so I did this contract for these people for a year. Then I got everything done. The contract ended. Um, I didn't know what I was going to do at the time, but then I was talking with my best friend from high school that I hadn't talked to probably in like, I don't know, a while. And he had been living on Maui for like at the time, I guess like 24, 23 years, somewhere around there. And he was like, "Hey, come out here and stay with me for a while." So I went there. I ended up getting a job. I ended up living on Maui for like 2 years. And like there, you talk about like the Marriott. I mean, Maui is nothing but hospitality. I mean,
Mhm.
there was like one job that I kept on seeing in the paper once in a while, working for the gas company out there, IT job, and it had these crazy qualifications, and they were paying like $15 an hour. I was like, no way. There's just that's jobs for somebody else, right? So I ended up going out there, and actually, my first job out there was as a cook. I was making $22 an hour as a dishwasher, and then I picked up a second job and started working as a prep cook and a line cook in another restaurant, like a 3-star. The first one was a 5-star, and then after that, I got like the sister company of the first job that I had. I started working as a prep cook there, and it was great for 2 years. But I'm glad I'm no longer there. that got old, especially when COVID came out.
Oh
Yeah, that got old in a hurry. Because
yeah.
I mean, you just got people from the whole world just coming like right there, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, the food industry is tough. Period. I used to work at McDonald's, Subways, and that's pretty much what gives me the motivation to keep pushing. I don't ever want to go back there.
well, I'm happy. I'm not working like a big fancy job or anything right now, but I'm perfectly happy where I'm at. Just tinkering around with my code, whenever I get the chance, and then maybe. I mean, I kind of feel like for like a DevOps job, I probably need to understand AWS or maybe Google Cloud a little bit better. I mean, I have like a light sail server running right now, but I mean that's not understanding AWS. That's just like understanding. Mostly, that's my understanding of Linux. Because you have to SSH in, and then you have to just do a few things to set up like a WordPress server, right? And I kind of wanted to do like I got this course. I think it was actually on Udemy. I got this course to actually do a web server on AWS in Go. But I was like, no, do I really want to spend all that time doing that when I could just be learning something else that I want to be learning? And this is when I was kind of going back between the company that I work at now. They're really good. They have a really good work culture. They don't pay the best, but the work culture they have is freaking awesome. And they will send you to. So this course they paid for. I ended up dropping out of it because I just didn't have any interest in it. But also, you know what a nibble is, right? You have a byte, and a byte is like half or a nibble is like half a byte. It's 4 bits, right? So I answered this question. I answered it right, except for I separated the nibbles, put a space in between them. They marked that answer as wrong, and I'm like, really? Then they tried telling me like a certain port on the system was for Windows Remote, right? When in fact that port was a Windows RPC port, which has nothing to do with the remote desktop. I mean, maybe remote desktop does use that port occasionally to communicate or initially communicate or something, but I can't remember what the port is. I think for anyways, I just once I started going through the course and they started marking these answers that I knew that were wrong, I was just like, yeah, I'm done with you guys, So.
Yeah, the tech industry is kind of a grind, man. I try to fight, burnout every day. That's pretty much why one of the main reasons I'm doing this podcast as well. It's kind of a nice diversion from being stuck in the books all day.
And also you get to like, talk with other people and just see how they dealing with life as like a developer or as like an IT person or something. Because like you said, yeah, I did burn out, but now I'm starting to get that itch again. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was living on Maui, I didn't care. I was living the life. Right. I mean, I actually took up photography when I was living there. So I'd be like a dishwasher or a cook for somebody else for like 7-8 hours a day. But then when my day started, I'd be like in the water with like an enclosure around one of my cameras, or I'd be out taking pictures of like all the beautiful flowers and whatnot, or just like had a couple of friends over there. A really close friend of mine. I'd be down at the beach park with like her daughter and just documenting her daughter's childhood, giving her pictures left and right. Or had this one guy walk up to me on the beach park, and he's like, I mean, I have like 2 cameras would be in a bunch of lenses. He's like, you a photographer? And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm a photographer, right? And he's like, hey, can you take my picture? I'm like, sure, why not? And he's like, well, give me a minute and I'll come right back. Well, this guy comes back with a torch and he starts breathing fire. And I'm like, whoa, okay, yes. So I got pictures of this guy, just fire breather, just blowing flames up into the sky at nighttime. It was really cool. And friend of mine had a younger female friend of mine who was like, I met her. She was working at a restaurant where I had another friend, gorgeous girl from, where was she from? Siberia. And took some, did some modeling shots of her. Took a picture, like another friend that I worked with, took a picture of his wedding. Got some awesome pictures of their wedding. I mean, I've been in the ocean taking picture of people scuba diving with fish and stuff. It was great. But then, like I said, after 2 years, my closest friend over there, she moved to like Miami for like a month, and I just wasn't feeling it anymore, right? Especially with COVID. So
yeah, it's you got to do different stuff just to stay interested in life, man. Like if I ever retire from coding, I was thinking I might become like a barbecue pit master.
I think I'm gonna become an air fryer master.
Oh yeah, I love the air fryer.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, I learned how to cook with some of the best. I learned how to, so a lot of the population on Maui is Latino. So I learned how to cook really good traditional Latino food, like, Mexican food.
Nice.
And also when that was at the 3-star, but at the 5-star, they had like their own little menu. I learned so much stuff there when it comes to cooking. So like, it took me a while to get the air fryer because I was like, nah. But I got like the Instapot too, and I was like, damn, I can make my own beans now in it like just like that, right? Just plug the thing in, hit the buttons on it, throw some beans and some water in there, and you're done. So
pressure cookers kind of freak me out. I always think they're gonna explode or something.
Well, the cool thing about this about the Instapot that I have is you know what sous vide is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can cook sous vide in here, and I love to make a good a pork bulgogi, and I sous vide it.
Nice.
So I get like a marinade, I put it in like a double plastic bag, and I just put it in there for like 4 hours at like 160, and it comes out awesome.
So don't you do a lot of cooking like that, Terrence? Like the low and slow?
Oh yeah, slow cookers are my thing, man. Like I think when I was living with my dad a long time ago, I had this like tiny little slow cooker, and I'd go to school and I'd come back home, and as I'm like walking up the driveway, I could smell the food that I was making or whatever. Like if I made a roast, I could smell roast being cooked like from the street when I parked, like, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It changes the game, especially like I got an air fryer, and that it does everything. Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing what technology has done today for cooking, especially.
I want to learn how to cook fish in the air fryer, and from what I see, it doesn't seem to be all that difficult. But
like frying it, or
yeah, so like what I saw is you take a lemon, right, and you cut thin slices, and you put that like on the grate or the bottom of the basket. Then you lay the fish on top. So then you get lemon infused into your fish, and you keep the fish from sticking to the bottom of the basket.
Oh wow, I never thought about that.
And then you could season it however you want, thyme or whatever you want to put on your fish.
Yeah.
But
that's cool. I have to try that.
I actually bought it from Walmart today. I actually bought a air fryer cookbook, and everything in there looks really good.
That's a smart idea. I need to looking to getting one of those.
Yeah, I love cooking, man. If I wasn't into coding and cooking paid really well, I'd probably be in that industry.
So I was working in like a really famous. You guys might not have heard of it, but it's famous like around Hawaii, a place called Merriman's. Excellent food. I mean, top notch, right? Let's just say that they're sous chefs, which is like bottom management in a restaurant. entry level JavaScript programmer going to make more than somebody who has like 10, 12 years experience in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Dang.
10, 15, 20,000 more a year, so.
That industry is tough, man. Demanding customers. You got to move nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the stress.
Yeah. But, so I don't know. I'm thinking like right now, I'm thinking Go, Node.js, and React. I really like React. And what motivates me about React is for a long time. So you can write a graphical user interface in C, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much work does that take?
Yeah, it's a ton of work.
How easy is it to exec a C executable in JavaScript and then take the information you get from that executable in JavaScript and put it on a web page? Pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, figuratively speaking. So I kind of look at like JavaScript as kind of like with Node.js as kind of like the graphical user interface to complement like low-level programs, because displaying. So if I'm like reading like a let's say like a I2C adapter, whatever it might be, it could be like maybe a GPIO expander, which a GPIO is a general purpose input-output pin. It can be either as an input or an output, right?
Mm.
So if I want to like read the registers off of that expander and then display that information, I could do that very easily through JavaScript and React. I was actually doing this before React was even out, so I think I was using Express somehow. And that's not really what Express is really used for much anymore, is it? I mean, isn't Express like mostly used for like the
server,
like the API backend sort of stuff?
Yeah. Express is the kind of like a layer over Node.js to do the server side stuff.
Right. So, but anyways, with I mean, I think it's comparatively speaking to like a really small C program, there's a lot of overhead there for like React, but it also does the job well enough. And it's like, I mean, to me, it's just like really simple to take that information from this little tiny C program and display it to the world, however you want to display that information. So much easier than like getting into like bit banging the memory addresses for video in Linux, right?
Yeah. I think JavaScript is really good if you just want to actually do something like handle a problem, display something. Like you're not super concerned about performance. You just want to make something that maybe the world can see.
Right. But that's why I like WebSockets now. From what I understand, gRPC is kind of the same thing, but like newer, improved, better somehow. I've read a bit about it, but I don't really understand it as well as I did WebSockets back in the day. But WebSockets, you can just like blast. It's like a text messaging system, right? You can just like hook that. What is it called?
Like real-time communication, unidirectional.
Right. Yeah, but it's like a texting service or something that like you get like send like a certain keyword over, it hooks that, and then you get a callback in JavaScript, right?
Oh, okay.
What?
Event listeners.
There you go. Event keyword or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you just say like, okay, so on data, do this with the data, right?
Yeah.
And you know exactly how it's coming through, then you just format it however you want to format it, and you got a web browser right there. All you have to do is maybe put a little bit of jQuery on it if that's what you want to use. What is everybody using nowadays? Tailwind,
Angular. Oh yeah, Tailwind for CSS. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Have I bored you guys yet?
No, it's interesting hearing the, you know, I think talking to you, Kyle Simpson, and a couple of other guests on here, like seeing how quickly like languages have evolved like over time. You mentioned like CompUSA and C and writing like low level languages and how you move on to Go and you're kind of out of the game now. It's really interesting to see that perspective. I never thought of what I would do, like going off, what I would do if I was to retire, or like leave coding. Yeah. So it's interesting. I don't know.
It's always interesting seeing, nobody's journey is the same. So it's interesting to see how people approach life. Like, I was making like $11 an hour until I was like 29 years old working at the hotel. And that was a dangerous job. Like I was the only employee at the hotel, like doing overnights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. So you can kind of imagine what went on.
I did that too. I was initially, I was the manager of a Comfort Inn in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh man!
Right in the middle of the hood. I lived in the hood for like 10 years.
Oh.
In Montgomery, Alabama. Supposedly they've cleaned it up nowadays, but
Alabama's really bad. Like it's really the hood. It's a lot of people don't think of it because it's Alabama, but this was pretty bad out there in certain parts.
I would say it's about half as bad as Oakland. So there was a shooting. There was a killing related to a shooting like every other night.
Oh no!
Back in the day, it made me glad that I had an all steel bathtub in my bathroom.
Oh man!
But nobody really messed with me there, though. I mean, I worked in the hood, I lived in the hood, and sorry. all my friends were from the hood back in the day, so.
Yeah, it makes you really appreciate life once you get out. It's kind of like, I almost had like PTSD from working at the hotel. It's like, wow.
Yeah, but some of the best friends that I had were like from back in the day, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You meet great people, but
people. The people that are okay, they're just trying to get by.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember working for this place called manufacturing, working on a manufacturing line, building water heaters. Also worked at Coca-Cola down the road, alongside the prisoners. They are from the prison. These guys would come out on a work furlough, work like their 6-7 hours to work off their payment for their sentence while they were in prison, and then they'd give them like $20 a week or whatever they'd give them. And then, they'd go back or whatever. And I never really felt like I was like ever really in any danger, working around these guys. Obviously, if they're going to let them out, they're like, good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They're making a little bit of, most of that money is going to paying for their prison term, but they get to keep a little bit of that money, right? So
it's kind of messed up. In a way, it's almost like slavery in some of these prisons. Like in certain of these Texas prisons, I heard like they still like pick cotton, they work the fields.
What? That sounds like seriously, that sounds like an Alabama thing. Back in the day, oh my God. I honestly though, I'm really glad that I don't live there anymore. I mean, I do miss. I don't know. That's a different discussion for like a different thing. you know. But yeah, I'm living in Oklahoma now, and it's a bit different here. Cost of living is really good here. I live in the Panhandle, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, Oklahoma is actually beautiful. Like Dallas really isn't too far from Oklahoma, like 2.5 to 3 hours.
Right.
Southern Oklahoma is like it's not like the tumbleweeds and all that. It's kind of like pine trees, lakes.
I saw plenty of that living in Arizona. We used to have to go up because my buddy had 40 acres, the place I was talking about earlier, and we actually fenced off the whole thing with a high tensile wire to keep so they have what they call free range there, where cows could come onto your property from like the ranchers and just like do whatever. And that's legal there. So in order to keep the cows off, we had to put like a 5-wire high tensile strand, and we'd have to go out there like 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, because the tumbleweeds are just like piled up, like 5 foot thick, and just starting to blow off into the property out there. We'd have to go out there with a torch and just burn that stuff.
Oh wow!
And keep in mind, this is like high plains or high desert, right? So it's like a lot of sand and stuff, and not a whole lot of grass or trees or everything, but a lot of tumbleweeds.
I know Oklahoma's in the tornado alley. Like, have you ever gotten close to a tornado?
I was when I was working at remanufacturing, we had one rip off the top of the building off while I was working. All I remember is running like heck, trying to get out to someplace safe, and remember seeing like we had these spindles of like the tops, and it was like for the 120 gallon, and that spindle probably weighed about 100 pounds. I remember seeing that sucker fly like this in front of me as I was like running, and had one come down. I was living in like in an apartment complex in a town called Millbrook, and we had one come down the side of the apartment complex, but I was on the first floor and it was like an all brick. So, I mean, I guess it's as safe as you can expect in that type of situation. But yeah, my dad told me some stories. My dad was in the Air Force, so he was telling me some stories about some stuff that happened when he was stationed in Texas.
Oh yeah. Dallas is kind of in that path too. So,
well, I'm lucky because we have like a pretty deep creek on one side. So what happens is like if a tornado does come through this area, so I don't live very far from Liberal, Kansas. From Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
So they usually go that way, or the creek. It's more like a river, but there's hardly ever anything in there water wise. So it just kind of pushes it out away from the town that I stay in. So I've been here for 2 years. I mean, there have been tornadoes that come by here, but not really here.
Okay. I think y'all have basements out there, right? Like, the houses can have them.
Well, my buddy lives around the corner. He's got a storm shelter out there.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, out here you're pretty much stuck because I think the ground is like limestone, so it's really expensive if you want to have a basement. So nobody really has it. I haven't really seen too many people with a storm shelter. So
yeah, his is kind of like a bomb shelter.
Yeah, I've seen it before.
It's like just stairs going down into the ground, and there's a door down there, and then there's like concrete ceiling, walls, and if water ever gets in there, it's going to flood in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I mean, going back to like what you were saying about different people doing different things, I've actually always preferred to do like the physical labor type stuff because I'm not the type that likes going and hang out at the gym. I like to work and get my exercise. I kind of feel like if I was actually sitting in an office 5 days a week or 8 hours or more, I would have to come home and ride like an exercise bike for like 20 miles or something,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you kind of, I think most people last in the tech industry about 10 years and they start getting tired and looking to do something else. So, I'm not necessarily at that point, but it's kind of like I need something else to take my mind off of tech. Like when I first started, I used to go hard, like work, then come home, watch courses, read books. But now it's kind of like, I guess I'm not coasting, but I'm not like super hardcore about it anymore.
Well, I've never actually been like a professional. I've done some pretty fun stuff, or stuff that I think is pretty fun as like a programmer, but it's always been a hobby. If that one job that I had in 2017 didn't fall in my lap, I wouldn't have cared. You know, so for me, I didn't really want to turn my hobby into a profession because I didn't want to ruin it, sort of thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But like at the same time, I see all these guys out there making this money. But I think, like I was saying earlier, that I would rather, I think that I would probably, I think I would be really good at it actually, is like DevOps. I mean, because I do code. I know a good bit about coding, but I'm like really good with Linux, and I like working with Linux. And I just need to learn the cloud stuff a little bit better, I think. So.
Yeah, they definitely go for it. You know, I think you'll be able to get a job in it.
Well, I used to hang out on Discord, and a couple of the guys, they're just talking to me about Linux and stuff, and they're just telling me you should just go out and get a DevOps job because you already know. But I think what I probably need is probably a company who's more like on premises versus like the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't really have a problem learning the cloud. I just like, but there's so much out there to learn. What is it that my next potential employer needs me to understand, right? Because you go out and you start learning all this other stuff. Well, maybe the next job offer that you're like closest to, minus the cloud stuff, maybe they're doing something else with the cloud, or maybe they're using a different cloud platform. You know, so. But
that's the thing about tech. Like you got to kind of make sure you bet on the right technologies, or
right,
kind of screwed.
To me, that stuff is still. All of it's really still interesting to me. But I think that stuff actually working with Linux, Docker, Kubernetes, all that sort of, maybe doing Ansible or Puppet, all that stuff is still reasonably interesting to me, or more so than maybe just plain old coding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. So
yeah, well, I know it's getting a little late, man. I hope we don't hold you too late.
No, I'm good. It's probably going to be like 3 a.m. in the morning. I should probably let you guys go.
Yeah, we'll end the show, but we could talk after the stream. But I know we usually end at around 10:30.
All right. Yeah, I'm seeing that like we've been on for like an hour and 38 minutes.
To the audience, we'll catch y'all next time. Peace.